What's up, fucker?
Good afternoon and a hefty how the hell are you to you?
A hefty
how the hell are you? How the hell are you?
How the hell are you? Yeah, we're going to talk about Roswell and Project Serpo, or as it's actually called, Project Crystal Night.
Crystal Night.
I remembered that.
I'm glad you did because, well, actually, so when you told me the topic and I was like, oh, I've never heard of that Project Serpo. After I started kind of looking into it, I was like, oh, I know this story. And it, in the story, it was like also known as Crystal Skull or the Crystal Night. And I was like, oh, that actually rings a bell more than Project Serpo. So I was familiar with the story.
It's the greatest student exchange program in the history of the universe.
Yeah. The first that we know of intergalactic student exchange program.
So, I think we should start at the beginning with Roswell. Obviously, I think if you haven't been living under a rock for the past 80 years, you know what Roswell is.
You should. Well, that's what I thought too. That, like, this is just... Everybody knows about Roswell.
Yeah.
But apparently that's not the case.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met anybody who doesn't know what Roswell is.
Well, so my oldest had a friend over yesterday, and they were just hanging out in the front room upstairs, and he came in, and he's probably a 17-year-old kid, and I was talking to him. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just watching this video on, the Roswell incident. And he was like, what's that?
Oh, Lord.
And I was like, well, it's where alien vehicles crashed and they were recovered by the U.S. military. And he was like, oh, is it like a movie? Are you fucking stupid? What the fuck are they teaching you guys at school?
You're like, how old are you again? 17? Yeah, your frontal lobe's not fully developed. I'll give you credit.
So he was a child. So I'm going to give him some, leeway on that. But don't ever come to my house ever again.
Until you're ready to talk about fringe topics on an adult level.
Do not look me in the eyes.
In fact, I want you to cower as you walk past me. Peasant.
Get your fucking paranormal activity shit fucking straight and then come back here.
So yeah, 1947, Roswell, New Mexico, which is actually, it was just outside of Roswell.
Yeah.
On a farm, this farmhand named Mac Brazel discovered this wreckage from, he didn't even know what it was. Some of the details he gave about it have stayed very consistent with other crashes, alleged crashes, I'll say, throughout time after that. Especially when he talks about the metal that was like tinfoil, but you would crumble it up in your hand, and then when you would open your hand, it would go right back to its shape.
Right.
And I've heard that story so many times from so many different people who have told their story about coming up on wreckage that they couldn't understand what it was. And even, I can't remember if he was a colonel, Jesse Marcel. Wasn't that his
He's
name?
a major.
Major.
Yeah. Major asshole.
Major asshole. Major pain. Let me take your mind off that pain. Yeah, so he took a piece of it home and showed it to his wife and his kids, and he did the same thing, crumbled it up in his hand. When he opened his hand, it went right back into the shape it was.
Right.
Which is really incredible.
It is very incredible. Almost so incredible that people don't believe him.
I think that goes with
pretty much everything, I guess.
Yeah, everything outside of what we can perceive at any given moment.
Right.
Like, you could actually have superpowers, and I could be like, no, you don't.
No.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
But secretly, you're, flying around and shit when nobody's looking.
I can eat 17 hamburgers.
I can, too, across like 4 days.
So, yeah, apparently there was a in New Mexico in the early summer time. I guess it's midsummer. It's like late June, early July when this happens. I guess it's pretty common for big electrical storms to sweep through that area.
Yeah.
So on the night before he finds this wreckage, Mac Brazel's sitting in his house and he's listening to the thunderstorm that's going on outside, and he hears a huge crash. He says he thinks it sounds different from all the other thunder that's going on. So the next day he goes outside and is going through his ranch. He's getting ready to move his cattle from one pasture to another, and he heads out to one of the pastures and finds a debris field that stretches 3/4 of a mile, and it's about 200 to 300 feet wide of just debris. So he thinks this is odd and takes some of the pieces that he finds on the ground that he thinks is some kind of wood, and he picks up the foil stuff that he says is thin like the foil you pull out of a cigarette package. So it's like just almost like gum wrapper foil.
Really thin.
Really thin. But yeah, like you said, you crumple it up and it springs back to its original shape.
You even tried to burn a piece.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't even hold like a char mark.
Yeah. So he takes some of this debris and goes to his neighbors, his closest neighbors, which are like 10 miles away, shows them the debris and tries to ask them if they've seen anything like it. And the neighbor guy pulls out his knife and starts to try to whittle the wood, but it won't cut.
Mm-hmm.
And so they pull out a match and try to burn it, and it won't burn. I saw an interview of the wife that was the neighbor, saying that looking back at it now, she would describe it as plastic, but they didn't really know what plastic looked like.
Thermoplastics wasn't a thing back then.
Right. So she didn't, looking back at it now, she would describe it as it looked like plastic, but they thought it was some type of wood, but they hadn't ever seen it before. And so they all talk about it. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go and contact the sheriff. So we take it to the sheriff, and the sheriff in turn notifies the military, which is Roswell Army Air Base, which is in the area. So that's when he gets in contact with this Major Jesse Marcel Sr. And they go out to the crash site, and he collects the debris that he takes home to his wife and family. Really weird. So he takes it home, and there's accounts from his son, who's Jesse Marcel Jr., who was 10 years old, 10 or 11 at the time, who recounts or recalls seeing the foil and the wood pieces, and also like an I-beam, a metal I-beam that's super light metal. And on this I-beam, he describes symbols that look like Egyptian hieroglyphs. Yeah. And so they're just kind of perplexed about this, and so they gather up as much debris as they can and take it back to the Army Air Base.
So I always find the hieroglyph thing super interesting because it's a parallel line across anything that has to do with aliens or extraterrestrials. And you could watch any amount of Ancient Aliens, and you will see hieroglyphs, in Egypt that basically discuss aliens or gods from above the sky, and they ride in these flying chariots and things like that. But some of the other parallel accounts is, for one, crop circles. The ones that aren't man-made tend to have these hieroglyphic looks to them.
Yeah.
And basically in a language that we don't understand. And then going back to Skinwalker Ranch, you see the hieroglyphs there, which were created by Native Americans, the Utes and the Navajo, and they all kind of tell the same story. But the one that really gets me with the hieroglyphs is, do Do you remember the story about the thing that landed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1965?
Is that the swamp gas incident?
No, that's a different one.
Oh.
No, so that one kind of ties back to the Nazi Die Glocke, the bell.
Oh, yeah.
And so this giant acorn-shaped thing landed in the woods outside of Kecksburg, and a bunch of people from town went and took a look at it before the army got there to confiscate it. And they all describe it the same way. It was shaped like an acorn or like a bell, and around the bottom of it there was a ring that had all these hieroglyphs that they couldn't tell what they were or what they meant. And so some of them tried to draw them out from memory, and they made this big like commemorative statue in the town with the hieroglyphs as they remembered them from what little they could see. So just seeing like hieroglyphs or these symbols that come from these different alleged starships that all these people have seen across the world, across different spans of time, has always been pretty crazy to me. And it makes you wonder if it is some kind of alien language, or is it some kind of universal symbol system, or what is it that you see it all across these different stories?
Yeah.
We'll never know the answer, but it's always going to be in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I was really perplexed about how all that stuff tied into it until I saw the movie Stargate, and it all made so much more sense. Like, it's just the dialing code that they use to get from one place to another.
Dude, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, Stephen Greer alleges that they use wormhole technology.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just a little mini Stargate around the ship that they just dial it in.
That would
area code first.
Explain the swirls on all the petroglyphs you see in southern Utah. How the swirl is just like the entrance into the Stargate.
Yeah, it's a black hole.
Solved it, dude.
So we just figured it out. Expect a knock on the door from...
Yeah, Dugway personnel, if you're listening, come and get us.
Yeah, just take us over and, let us take a look inside.
Pay us handsomely and we'll stop talking about it.
On air.
On air.
We're still going to talk about it in person.
Yeah. We'll talk about it on our Ghost Adventures.
So, post calling the army base there, trucks arrived to collect all the debris and take it to Wright-Patterson Airfield, which we talked about in another episode. But Wright-Patterson was kind of the epicenter for all crash retrievals, and it still is. They literally have a protocol for it.
Yeah, that's where the OSS, it's like the Air Force Investigation...
OSI.
OSI, yeah. Is located, and so anything that happens with aircraft, they investigate it there.
Yeah, any non-American aircraft.
So he collects... So Jesse Marcel Sr., JMS, we're going to call him, Jams, takes the stuff back to the his base, which was the Roswell Army Airfield. And that same day, his general that was stationed there, who was... Colonel William Blanchard was the colonel there, acting colonel, releases a statement to the press saying that they have recovered a UFO, a flying saucer.
Yeah.
And so this goes out to the news, becomes a huge national story that they've recovered, the U.S. military has recovered a flying saucer, alien aircraft. So... in the meantime, they're gathering up all the debris, and they go and grab Mac, who's the guy that discovered this debris field, and they take him to the base, and they hold him there, and they're kind of investigating him and asking him questions and shit.
They held him unlawfully for like 22 days or 23 days.
Yeah.
He wasn't allowed to leave. He couldn't talk to anybody. He was basically being imprisoned and interrogated the whole time. And it's noteworthy to say that Mac Brazel never spoke about it ever again. And anytime anybody pressed him about it, he's like, I will never talk about it ever. Don't ask me.
Yeah. He also said, if I ever find anything again, I'm not going to report it.
Yeah. Which just tells you how fucked up the government is/was.
Yeah.
That they wanted to keep this secret so bad. Like, there's no telling what they did to him, but obviously they scared him to the point where he wasn't even willing to speak about it, not even to his closest friends, not even to his own son.
Yeah.
You can only imagine what he had to go through.
Yeah. Probably butt stuff.
Probably butt stuff.
I would imagine butt stuff.
At the very least.
I mean, I'm imagining butt stuff right now.
I was too, but strangely it wasn't in like the typical form of like an alien probe or your doctor that wouldn't massage your prostate for you.
Yeah.
Oh, memories.
So they put out this statement, and the whole kind of country tunes into it. You know, it's a national story that we've just found an alien craft, and it's out there in the public. And so from there, it's going to be shipped from Roswell, or in New Mexico, to Ohio, to Wright-Patterson. And but they stop in Texas.
Yeah.
To make a stop in Texas at an air base there in Texas. So they fly all the debris there to Texas, and from Texas comes out another report saying that that first report was false, and that it was just a weather balloon that people misidentified as a spaceship.
And that's where you get that famous picture of Jesse Marcel, Jams, holding basically this piece of tinfoil, because as the press was going to come in and take pictures of him holding up this debris, some guys in, army fatigues come in, take all that stuff away, and bring in all this other shit that wasn't related to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of his, dying regrets, was that they did that, and he had to go along with it.
Right.
And yeah, that picture is so iconic to Roswell, even though it wasn't even taken in Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they shanghaied him on that deal.
Oh yeah, they brought him all the way there to Texas to take the picture, so that they could show that he's a dumbass in the picture.
Yeah.
That he mistook balsa wood and a few scraps of aluminum foil as a UFO, and he's an intelligence officer.
Yeah. They basically just try to patsy him for the whole snafu of Blanchard saying, yeah, we found a UFO, but they were really trying to pin it on Marcel.
Yeah.
With that picture.
Right.
And yeah, he probably felt like a piece of shit after that.
Yeah, I would, for sure.
Oh yeah.
You just nationally were called a dumbass.
Yeah.
His job, all the way up until that point, he was an intelligence officer. He worked at the Roswell, basically the White Sands site, which was the Air Force's only nuclear bomb brigade in the Air Force. So they were accustomed to seeing highly advanced air machines.
Yeah.
All the time, and he was routinely, that was his job, was to investigate crashes, and so he would go around and look at down crafts and down projectiles that they had shot from the White Sands area to, look at the debris fields, and so he wasn't a dumb guy.
No, not at all. And that's why it's so shitty if he's just yet another person who's been damaged by the government trying to keep this secret.
Right.
And just one of many. But yeah, the thing that I always found the most intriguing about the Roswell thing is how much is still being put out there to dismantle the UFO part of the story.
Right.
And even the Freedom of Information Act and declassified documents still come out and say it was a Russian spy balloon or whatever the fuck it is. And it's dude, Nobody's buying it.
So, yeah. So, this story comes out saying it was a weather balloon. And for the most part, people buy it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. This guy's just dumb and whatever. So, a few decades go by, and some scientists start looking into. So one of the companies, it's like Lockheed, but it's fucking, what's it called?
McDonnell
Douglas hire this Dr. Robert Wood, who's a aerospace engineer. So they hire him in 1968 to kind of investigate to see if UFOs are real. And so he gathers up a team of scientists that work with him there at McDonnell Douglas. And one of the guys is Stan Friedman, who's a nuclear physicist, also like an amateur ufologist. He becomes part of the team, and they start investigating. And over 2 years, they find out, and their findings are that, yeah, UFOs are real, and it's worth investigating. Dr. Wood feels like putting this information out might damage his career, so he just stops there and says, yeah, it's worth investigating, but he doesn't want to go in front of Congress and say that all this stuff is real, so he just kind of ends it there with his UFO investigations on a big scale.
Yeah.
Stan Friedman, on the other hand, thinks that it's super important and just goes off on his own and just becomes like the UFO scientist guy. That's what his main job is. So he investigates all these stories and stuff, and it's not until 1978 that he gets past the story of the Roswell incident. Like, he's been doing all this research for 10 years now.
Yeah.
And still hasn't ever heard of the Roswell incident until a TV producer asks him if he's ever heard of it, and then puts him in contact of Jams.
Can you imagine, like, you've been investigating UFOs for a decade, and you randomly hear about this one story, which happens to be like one of the biggest UFO stories in history. Can you imagine just how, like, small you would feel just for that moment? Like, wait, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Yeah.
Roswell? And then
what?
And then you come across it, and it's as blatantly horseshit as the whole thing, and you go, what? How have I never heard of this? I feel so stupid.
Yeah. I would definitely feel like a inadequacy, for sure, that I had missed the biggest UFO story in that modern of history, for sure. But yeah, he's blown away by it, and he goes and talks to Jams and gets the story from him, and Jams tells him that, you know, how this all was a cover-up. And so it's still not even until like 20 years after that, 15 years after that, when the Freedom Information Act comes out in like 1993, and so they get all these documents that they're able to read, and in the documents is the original negative from that picture that's taken in the newspaper. And in the picture, he's holding a piece of paper it's a document from the government talking about what he has to say on camera. And so with computers, they're able to enhance and read what it says, and the document talks about how he's not supposed to talk about the UFOs that were recovered and stuff like that. So Friedman puts it out there in the main public eye that this may have been a cover-up. And so the government does what the government does, and comes out and says, yes, it was a cover-up. And the cover-up of a weather balloon, what it actually was was a weather balloon.
It was a Russian spy balloon.
So they said it was a nuclear weather balloon that was supposed to go up into high atmosphere and listen for the sound signature of Russian nuclear weapon testing.
Yeah, and
that's why the people at the airbase didn't recognize the debris, because it was a different type of weather balloon.
Sure, but
yeah,
I always love it when you hear the government's like cover-up story, because it's always more far-fetched than it being a fucking alien.
Yeah.
Swamp gas. It was swamp gas. And that whole...
You guys are all just hypnotized by the swamp gas.
Yeah.
It's all the same shit.
That Project Blue Book, I'm drawing a fucking blank on what was his name.
You look like Colonel Sanders a bit.
Yeah, that guy. I know in like 5 minutes it's going to snap right into my mind. But yeah, he was doing this press conference over this UFO crash landing, and he's like trying to explain it, and he gets called away from the podium, answers a call from the White House, and the person on the other end is like, tell them it was swamp gas. And it's like, that's not even creative. Like, shouldn't you have like a team of writers to just go out and make some crazy explanation that seems really far-fetched?
At least make it a cool story.
Yeah, make it fun.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, yeah, it's swamp gas, even though there's never been a trace of swamp gas in this area. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. They'll believe it. They're dumb.
They're all stupid. They read the newspaper.
Can you imagine having the newspaper as the only source of air quotation credible news?
Yeah, because nobody's ever manipulated a newspaper before.
It's so hard to do that.
Yeah. You just go in there and rearrange the type
Yep.
before you print it. That's all you got to do.
Yep. You don't got to do that. You just call the person and tell them what to put in there.
Yeah, be like, dude, I'll pay you an extra $1 for the day if you just swap up the newspaper to say that.
$1?
Whoa!
I could buy groceries for the whole month.
Yeah, I think the Roswell really did kind of kick off the kind of a national sense of UFOs for a lot of people.
For me, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And admittedly, I didn't even know what Roswell was until I saw the movie Independence Day. When the fucking old Jew guy, I can't remember his name, he brings it up. He's like, Roswell, New Mexico. And I was like, what is that? But at the time, you know, in the mid-90s was kind of like UFO stuff and paranormal stuff really started kicking off on TV.
Yeah.
And you could actually see these things. You didn't see them a lot, but when you did, you were super intrigued because it wasn't like an open conversation that people had.
No.
You know, even talking, like listening to a lot of people who were kind of involved in that field, it wasn't until well after the 2000s that it like kind of stopped becoming a fringe topic that people would kind of talk about behind closed doors or whatever. It was never just like an open discussion that you had at any given moment.
Yeah.
Which is strange because to me it's like, I don't know what I would talk about if I couldn't talk about like aliens and paranormal shit or conspiracy theories. Like,
I'd be super into the weather, I guess.
yeah, you're just like, yep, warm out today.
Those are cumulus clouds. Looks like we're going to get some rain.
We're going to get some rain. And then you just sit there in silence for another hour.
We'd still be talking with old-timey accents.
Accents?
Wow, look at that weather out there. It's really doing something.
Having that weird staccato radio voice. Wow, Jiminy Willikers, I say. It's quite warm out today.
I've got the perspiration going and everything. No, for me, yeah, in the maybe late 80s, early 90s, when Unsolved Mysteries came out on TV. And I used to watch that shit all the time whenever it was on. And that was the first time I saw the information about the Roswell crash and the supposed cover-up, and that just really grabbed me for some reason, and it was shocking to see that like the government could and would be willing to cover up something like that. I understand it now being as maybe an issue of national security. If the government finds this super advanced technological thing and doesn't want it out there in the public, or doesn't want news of it traveling around to other countries and them getting a hold of it. I can see why they might want to cover it up or hide it, but it was just really eye-opening that the government, for me as like a young person, I was like maybe 8 or 10, watching these unsolved mystery shows, and then like later on the X-Files and shit like that.
Yeah, the X-Files really kind of broke down that idea of it maybe not being fringe, but it being more like you're kind of crazy for talking about it, because it was such a big show at the time, and it captured the imagination of so many people. But that's because I think subconsciously always kind of wanted to know about that. We always wanted to know about, life on other planets and things like that. Or even, the cryptids or whatever that they would investigate. But that show was like mainly grounded in aliens. That was the backbone of the show. It didn't matter what side quest they were on, it was always going to lead back to aliens. And that show kind of changed like public perception in a way that it was like, it's okay to talk about it. Like, we're making a show about it.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was most stuff you would see on TV, and as a kid I remember this, that like anytime you would see anything about aliens or UFOs, or they would talk about, abductions or things like that, it always came back to the same thing, that these aliens are like malicious, or they would tell the story in the scariest way possible with the most ominous music. Versus now we talk about it and we kind of go, yeah, the people who have been, hurt by, these alien abductions or whatever, it seems to always be on accident.
Yeah.
Instead of them going like, oh yeah, we're going to abduct these people and we're going to stuff shit up their butts, and then we're going to beat on them and we're going to throw them out of the fucking air, like all this crazy shit that they try to sell you back then. Now we look at it and go, that's just so dumb.
Yeah, if they wanted to harm these people, they would have just zapped them where they stood.
Yeah.
Hey, you have to look back at like all the ancient recounts of interactions with beings from outside of the earth. They described them or depicted them as gods.
And they're always like benevolent.
And wanting to teach and giving the people of Earth information and new technologies and a better understanding of the way that the universe works, or so it's looking back at historical accounts of these beings coming down, and it doesn't look like they're have ill will towards humans, but more of like a guiding hand in where we're going or supposed to go, or giving direction on somewhere that we could eventually get to if we don't blow ourselves up first.
Or telling us to stop doing stupid shit.
Yeah. Which,
we're humans, we do that a lot.
I think that's in our nature to do stupid shit, either on purpose or on accident.
Well, which one do you want?
I don't care.
Yeah, I think at the time, trying to make them scary was it was either trying to just sensationalize it to the point where you would keep watching, or it was like another hand that gets played into it of make them scary so people won't want to know about it.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of sad to say that the whole UFOs and aliens and things like that, it's kind of its own empire now, because you have things like Phenomicon, or you'll have all these different shows that get made, Ancient Aliens or Hangar 18 or things like that. You have all these very prolific characters like Stephen Greer or Lou Elizondo, and they're making all this money by doing all these speeches or appearing on all these shows and what have you, to where it's kind of become a money-making empire. There's not a lot of money in it, but there's enough money to justify keep doing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to Roswell, I think the one thing that people tend to overlook is that there were bodies recovered, and one of them was alive.
So yeah, so there wasn't.
Air
There
quotes
was
allegedly.
actually 2 different crash sites that at the same time. So there was the one debris field that Mac found,
Mhm.
and then another crash site that was found by. Let's see, I got his name written down here because I knew I wouldn't remember it. I just have to find it. It doesn't really matter what his name is, but this guy finds this crash. The same time he gets up to the crash site, there's a class of archaeology students that have a dig site that's just nearby, and they notice something going on, and so they head down and walk out to this crash site that's out in the desert. And this guy and this class get there at the crash site at the same time, and notice that there are bodies laying on the ground. And so they're looking at these beings that are laid out, and one of them seems to be alive still. And they're just like, what the fuck? And they see the craft. It's an actual flying saucer that has crashed.
Mhm.
They don't know what it is. As they're standing there looking at it for about 10-15 minutes, the military rolls up and tells them they can't be there.
You
What
didn't
they've-
see
yeah,
anything.
You haven't seen anything, and escorts them off the site. But yeah, that's where they get these stories that there are aliens that have been recovered, and one of them was found alive
And
and lived for, what was it, another 10 years or something like that?
yeah, I think it was like 1956 or 57 when he passed away. I mean, obviously, this is all air quotations alleged,
Mm.
but they named him EBE-1, Extraterrestrial Biological Entity 1. And as the story goes, he did live for quite some time, and even though he couldn't speak English, and obviously we don't speak whatever language he speaks, they were able to form some kind of communication, and essentially he was willing to give them some of his technology, and in return he needed to be able to fix his communication device to talk to his home world. And that leads us right into Project Serpo,
Yeah.
or Crystal Knight. And essentially he was able to fix his communication device and call back to his homeworld for help, and he died shortly thereafter. But the U.S. military still used that communication device to talk to the people from his home world in Zeta Reticuli, and basically created an exchange program where these Ebens, as they called them, would come down to Earth. They would collect their dead pilots, and they would take back, 13 people
Yeah.
to their home world to basically learn about their culture and who they are as a people and all that. And on the whole, this story seems so outlandish and so like science fiction kind of thing, but it's so entertaining that you kind of go, the reason it's believable is because it's so outlandish and it's so far-fetched, and you're like, there's no way this could happen. There's no way people would volunteer for this.
I could see that people would volunteer for it.
Not the kind of people you would want to
Yeah.
volunteer for.
Yeah.
You would get like Tom DeLonge, who'd be
Yeah.
like, I'm ready to go. Let me take my guitar.
Be up there running around with the sock on his cock through the Eben village.
So for reference point, Tom DeLonge is the lead singer and guitarist of the band Blink-182, and he is so enamored with aliens and UFOs and stuff that he created a project to the stars that involves all these big figureheads from this community of like truth seekers for UFOs and aliens and things like that. It's even like a big thorough line through his music. Like, when I first picked up a Blink-182 album, there's a song on there called Aliens Exist, and it's literally about aliens. And then later on, after Blink-182 disbanded, he created another band called Angels and Airwaves, which is talking about angels from the stars and airwaves of communication between us and aliens. This is literally why it's named that.
I didn't even know he had another.
Yeah, he's been in a few bands. He also had a Boxcar Racer, and I think there was one more. I can't remember. But he definitely like fits the bill of that fringe type.
Yeah.
But he's so sincere about it that you kind of overlook it. Like, this is a guy, he's donated so much of his own money to this cause, and he works so hard at it, and he's so sincere about it that you kind of look past some of his more odd personality traits.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch that interview with him and Joe Rogan?
I watched a lot of it. I didn't watch the whole thing because it was so awkward.
Oh, it was super hard to watch.
Yeah, just because it was... Like you said, he's really super adamant about the things that he's doing and saying and what he believes. And Joe Rogan was just...
He was not having it.
Yeah, he was just so not about it that it was hard to listen to.
Which, it's funny, as many of the episodes of his that I've listened to, and that's such a commodity of a topic on his show where he, talks about aliens and UFOs and things like that. But when you get this guy who's like way on the fringe of it, and it is bringing up all this kind of like way far-fetched stuff, and Joe Rogan is just suddenly puts up a wall about it, and you're just like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I think it's more of a personality conflict between the two, because they're not even close to being the same, like, in any way, shape, or form. The fact that they're a Caucasian male is about all they have in common.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of threw me off about it, or turned me off on listening to the whole thing, was just like, it didn't seem like there was really any conversation going on anymore. It was just like Tom DeLonge would say something, and then Joe would kind of just trying to rip it apart or something.
Yeah, he kind of did the same to Dan Aykroyd on his show. Did you ever watch that one?
Yeah, towards the end of it, yeah.
Where he was just being like, get the fuck out of here. You're full of shit. Like, dude, that's kind of fucked up, man.
Yeah.
Just let him say what he's got to say, and you could just say, I agree or don't agree, or that's interesting, or I don't know if I believe that. Like, he was being kind of an asshole to him.
Yeah.
And it's, come on, dude. That's one of the founding members of the Ghostbusters.
Fucking Dan Aykroyd.
That's Ray Stans, all right? Yeah, I think...
I think that... So I had, when you mentioned it, like I said, when you mentioned it last night, and I started looking into it, I was like, oh, I have heard this story. I didn't really ever do a deep dive into it, and I started looking into it. But I had that same thing, as like, dude, this is so fucking... This is out there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm into some weird shit, and but this one is, out there, and I'm having a hard time believing this to be anything other than a work of fiction. It almost... Because the story goes almost like it was written to be a movie. Like...
Yeah.
And, so, where we get accounts from this is from emails, right?
Yeah.
From an anonymous person emailing... I can't remember who they were contacting. I think it was a website.
It was like a UFO message board kind of thing.
And so this anonymous user was claiming to be one of these astronauts that went to the planet and stayed there for... It was supposed to be a 10-year program, but they miscalculated because of the length of Eben years. Ended up being they were gone for 13 years.
Yeah. Well, the Eben, they say on the planet where the Ebens live, a day is 40 hours long.
Yeah.
Because they have two suns, a two-star system, and it's pretty much perpetual daylight.
Yeah.
And But yeah, all these people that were picked for this program were they had to do like a year of training and then do their 10-year trip, and then when they came back, a year in quarantine, and then another year to debrief.
Yeah. So the whole like opening of the story is pretty much the opening of Men in Black, where this anonymous guy that's emailing gets chosen by some generals to go for this secret program. He goes to this facility, and they put him on this elevator. He goes down, doors open up, and there's like 13 or 15 other people there, and he sits down, and they do like this test of, just like the opening scenes of Men in Black, where he first gets picked. And I was like, dude, I swear I've fucking seen this movie before. I've seen this movie. Whether that, was a rip-off of this story, or Men in Black was a rip-off of this story, or not, I don't know, but the similarities were it was so similar that it was hard not to put those two together.
Well, it's always a weird thing that you have to just kind of make up your own mind on if one thing informs on another.
Yeah.
So thinking about like the lightning that took down this UFO in New Mexico, recently Stephen Greer was talking about we have technology now that we can take out UFOs, and it's a simple electromagnetic burst, which is basically what lightning is. It's plasma that's being transferred down, but it's highly electrified, so it creates an EMP field around it. So yeah, it's basically an EMP weapon. So is that informed on the whole taking down the UFO, or did we know that later and we just apply that to the UFO from Roswell? It's which one is the original? You know, it's really chicken and egg.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, I really like the story. So yeah, let's tell the rest of the story first, I guess. So this anonymous person eventually makes it onto this team that's chosen to go to their home planet, where they get put on a shuttle and taken up to the mothership, right?
Yeah. So they had to undergo this extensive training program. And the training program was really in-depth on things that don't really get trained a lot, like being put in a hole in the ground for 5 to 10 days at a time, so you can understand, like, being in a tight space and being completely alone, like no one to talk to or no one to help you or whatever, like complete isolation training. Some of the other zero gravity stuff that they went through, because if you get in like a 747 and you basically do like up and down wavelengths in the air, you'll get weightless training, which is how they film space movies.
Right.
Going through all of this very in-depth training for like a full year before the ship even comes to pick them up. And then they were allowed to take all this gear. It was like 40 tons of gear, and they had like jeeps and motorcycles and weapons and food and all these other supplies that they also say that when they were put in the ship, that the aliens were just like, oh yeah, we got it, and they used anti-gravity to load all the shit into the ship.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of cool.
You have to think about the logistics of, like, if they're taking jeeps and motorcycles, where are they going to get their fuel from?
I was literally thinking that when I was driving here. I was like, well, you're not going to use them as sparingly as you can because fuel's limited.
Yeah.
Even if
for 10 years, you're going to bring fuel for 10 years on you. I mean...
But how fucking cool would it be to be the first human to ride a motorcycle on an alien planet? Sign me up.
Would be dope. I guess maybe if the Ebens could, like, retrofit one of their drives onto your motorcycle, and you can just go light speed on your fucking motorcycle.
Dude. And you could, like, create a whole persona. The Ebens wouldn't know any better. You'd be like, yeah, in my world they call me Ghost Rider.
Yeah. So part of their protocol too, when they finally get into the ship, was that they didn't actually use their names. So they got assigned a number. So each person was a number, and then there was some of them that gave themselves nicknames and referred to themselves as nicknames, and one of them was Flash Gordon.
Yeah,
was his nickname.
Flash. Ah!
So he had the Ebens calling him Flash Gordon, which is pretty fucking hilarious for an alien story, but
right, like I would have been like, yeah, you can call me Captain Jean-Luc Picard. You're like, oh, what a cool name,
Captain Luc Picard. So they finally get done. They get done with their training. They get up in the shuttle, get to the mothership, and the trip is going to take 10 months to get from our, just outside of our orbit, Earth's orbit, to their planet in Zeta Reticuli. And so they start going, and along the journey, one day or whatever, they get up. One of their fellow human passengers is not there, so he doesn't show up, and so they go looking for him, and then the Ebens tell him that he's dead.
Yeah.
And so all the rest of the humans are trying to find him and asking if they can see the body, and they tell him no, they can't see the body because he's being quarantined, to see what killed him, if it's like a space sickness or something that has killed him.
Yeah, because they reported that they were having issues with constantly getting sick and blacking out and things like that, but the aliens would give them these like wafers or cookies, and they said they tasted like chalk and they would instantly feel better. But it was kind of an ongoing thing for this 40 light year journey where they would just randomly get sick. Mm-hmm. And they did let the doctor on the team go examine the body. I think it was 308 was his number. And he basically concluded that this person died from an aneurysm, a brain aneurysm. But yeah, the aliens were trying to figure out, like, was it caused by the space travel? Was it some kind of weird reaction? Was it just the human body couldn't stomach it? Like, whatever it was. And I don't even think they told you in the story, no matter where you heard the story, like, there was never any definitive reason except for a brain aneurysm.
Yeah, that's the only information I could find. And how weird would that be, traveling through space for 10 months with all these beings? I'm assuming, because they're saying this mothership is huge.
Yeah.
It's like a huge ship. It's like a huge building, being in a huge building. With most of the beings that are on the ship that you can't communicate with, there's only a few of them that actually speak very broken English.
Yeah.
And so you're traveling through 10 months, one person dies, and you're trying to find information, but nobody speaks your language.
Yeah.
I could see that being a very tense situation, like, what the fuck are these aliens doing to us? But yeah, they get there to the planet. And this is another thing that I thought was odd, was that they get to the planet and they go to the main city, or the main living area of the Ebens, and it's the planet where they're at is like a desert.
Yeah.
Well, the area that they're at is like a desert. Like Dave mentioned before, there's 2 suns on the planet, and so
it's hotter than
it's hotter.
fuck.
Yeah, it's like being in the New Mexico desert in the middle of summertime. Hot. 110, 120 degrees outside. So they're given these devices that are kind of almost like a personal air conditioning unit, it seems like.
Yeah.
But they don't have to have any helmets or anything to breathe. But their villages are what we would consider almost, they look almost primitive, almost like Tatooine.
Yeah, they're like reminiscent of like adobe structures.
Yeah.
Like basically rock and mud in a little dome. And keep in mind the Ebens are also only listed as being like 4 feet tall.
Yeah.
So everybody you're looking at is like child size.
Yeah.
Except for your fellow humans.
Yeah, so they get there and I think in the story it says that they're surprised by the optics of seeing what looks like a primitive village as their main city.
Yeah.
And these Ebens have been telling them that they've been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And so they have this capacity to travel through space and time the way that they do.
But they live in mud huts.
But they live in mud huts
Which
on
is,
this planet.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
I don't know if that speaks more to like the character of the aliens, that they're, you know, maybe still somewhat in tune with nature, or try to just have as simplistic of a life as possible, but they have all these abilities versus us. We live in houses, we use technology for everything, and it kind of reverses us to where we're no longer, you know, connected to nature or live simplistic lives anymore.
Yeah.
So it is still a strange thought, but it's less about that it's strange and more that it's just foreign to us.
Yeah. And that's kind of what the thought led to the thought of, like, okay, it seems like it's an almost primitive village. So the humans communicate with the alien, the Ebens, and they find out that they're on this planet. There's 640,000 of them. That's all of them all together.
And that's nothing.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
There's more people in the state of Utah.
More people live in fucking Salt Lake Valley.
Yeah. And they all live in these kind of adobe hut structures. They say that they believe that they're limited. Most families, of the Eben families, there'll be 4 of them, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Mm-hmm. So that they believe that they were kind of limited to only having 2 kids, which might be what's restricting them to the number 600 and whatever thousand. Which is weird also, because that's kind of close to the number that was written on those stones, which was supposed to be 500, almost 600,000 people that the Earth could sustain indefinitely. That's the number that we should stay at and not go above, which was written on those stone tablets in back east somewhere, whatever that was, the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah, the ones that got randomly destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also interesting that, you know, they had these population factors of you're only allowed to have the 2 kids, and China does that, even though they still have like a bajillion fucking people, that they still have a lot of those laws with overpopulation. And and just the fact that was on that Georgia Guidestone and that number is so similar is also kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And it's just another one of those running parallels that you see in other different pieces of lore when it comes to UFOs or aliens, is that population control.
Yeah. So another thing that kind of struck me as interesting was that they said that the Ebens had like their base, or most of the Ebens had an IQ level of 185, which is brilliant according to humans. But most of them had daily tasks or jobs that were just like maintaining their village and working to better their society. And so they all worked as a collective. And there was a big tower in the middle of the village that when the sun would move the shadow of the tower would hit one symbol on the ground, and then all the evens would change to doing a different task.
Mm-hmm.
And they would work doing this task until the sun hit another one of the dials, almost like a clock telling them what to do and when. But there were, excuse me, also different working classes. Some of them were scientists, and some of them were doctors. But they all just worked as a collective, to the betterment of their society.
Yeah, they didn't use money.
Right.
They would just do whatever job they were assigned based on their own aptitude. And they had like a distribution center where everything was provided for them, but they could go ask for other things.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually kind of interesting, because throughout history, we as humans have kind of done that too. Even like, what's that fucking market called in
Facebook
England?
market.
Yes.
Oh.
No, in England there's like
Piccadilly? No, that's Piccadilly Circus.
It's basically like you get a catalog, and you look through this catalog. I don't know if this system is still in play. It's something I heard about a long time ago. But yeah, you'd like get a catalog, almost like a Sears catalog, go to this distribution center, go up to like basically a register, and tell them you want this item, and this item, and then they go pull it from a DC, a distribution center, and give it to you, and then you leave. Kind of a similar thing, only you have to pay here, but there they didn't have to pay.
Yeah.
But one thing that goes with that story is that they talk about they would spend a certain amount of time working, a certain amount of time resting, and then a certain amount of time praying. But the humans that went over there could never figure out like their theology. They couldn't understand their religion or what they were praying to.
Yeah.
They would just take note that they would spend this off amount of time praying to something or other, but because of the language barrier, they could never figure it out.
Yeah. So, the one major thing that I just couldn't understand about listening to the story and listening to their kind of the basis of their culture, how it operates, and what they do is, why have they been coming to Earth?
Yeah, that's the big question. And even if this whole story was structured around another society that did things way different, you would still have that same question. Like, what is here that is of some importance? Like, It's not a vacation spot. We don't have any like extremely limited resource here that they don't have on other planets. I mean, if they were coming for water because they live on a desert planet, how were they transporting it? Or, did they have to desalinate it or whatever? They're not coming here for, jewels and gold and shit like that. Like, why would they? They don't use money, so there's no like monetary value.
So yeah, I mean, it talks about in the story. It talks about how, like, partway through their 10 years that they spent there, they ran out of their food supplies that they brought, and so they ended up just eating the even food.
Yeah, they were like vegetarians.
What they said was just really bland.
Yeah.
Most of their food tasted like paper or chalk.
Mm-hmm.
And their water or their fluid that they drank was like milky, so kind of thick, and tasted like apples. So, I mean, they didn't come here for water or come here for anything like that.
They don't need that.
So yeah, I was just kind of perplexed about why they would be advanced yet live almost primitively, which, I mean, that might just be the advancement of society. What if we're looking at it all wrong?
We're doing it all wrong.
Like, dude, so we have this view of society being at its height right now, and there's been 3 different cataclysms, right, or 6 different cataclysms supposedly in the Earth's history, that has kind of wiped out human civilizations and has restarted them basically from a Stone Age perspective. Like, you get thrown back to, hunter-gatherer, and then rebuild society from them. What if we're at the bottom of society, and the height of society really is what we know to be like a primitive civilization?
It's very possible, and I think about this way more than I should with the whole 6 cataclysms thing, and thinking about, okay, if society has like reached this pinnacle and then this big cataclysm happens and we have to start over, why have archaeologists not found skyscrapers or manufacturing plants or remnants of houses like this one? How come we haven't found that? And I kind of had that same train of thought. Maybe it's because we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And all these other cultures figured out, well, it's better to kind of stay primitive and live in this mud hut, or to only build structures based on culturalism or like a deity or something like that. You think about a place like Göbekli Temple, that's still being uncovered. They can't figure out what it was for. Was it like a shrine? Was it a place of worship? What was it? But it's this massive undergoing to build this place because it took tons and tons of stones. And even though it's been like 10 years, they think they only have like 10% uncovered.
Yeah.
And it's going to take another 20 or 30 years to excavate the whole thing.
But especially in the time frame that it was supposedly built, which was...
predates everything.
11,000 years ago, where there was previously known to only be hunter-gatherer civilization. So what were these hunter-gatherers building a temple for?
Yeah.
And how were there so many of them with so much leisure time to be able to build these structures?
And furthermore, how did they move these giant fucking stones?
Yeah.
Without technology like we have now. But we, like you said, we look at ourselves as being the pinnacle of society because we have huge skyscrapers, we have manufacturing plants, we have grocery stores, we have all these things that make life very convenient to live. That doesn't mean we're necessarily doing it right.
Yeah. I mean, you think if you brought one of those primitive hunter-gatherers that have the same brain capacity as we do, right? They're still the same anatomically correct human beings as we are.
Mm.
You brought one of them back, forward in time to our culture, and they'd be able to adapt, I think, pretty easily. But if it was the other way around, you took one of us back to Stone Age, and we got to hunt and gather, and we wouldn't make it. Like, most of us would not make it.
No. And even the ones that do make it are just going to be
who's
fucking
more
miserable.
Advanced? Like, who's more advanced?
Yeah,
really?
Exactly. I don't know about you, but I can't go take a shit without my phone.
No.
So I couldn't imagine having to go
hunt I've done it before, but it was fucking hard.
It was miserable.
Yeah.
You're reading the back of the spray bottle.
It was nice, though. My legs didn't fall asleep.
Yeah.
I wasn't sitting there for like 15 minutes.
You just had to shit and get.
Yeah.
You're like, I hope this poop goes quickly. Yeah, I did like the part in the story where when they actually had to start eating the Eben food, and they didn't like it, and they wanted that meat for the protein, and they started hunting these animals that they had, and the Ebens were okay, but they would be kind of disgusted by watching them eat this meat. And it's like, yeah, I'd do the same thing. Yeah. I'm sorry. If I'm on another planet and I had to eat chalk food all the time, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to kill that animal over there, or I'm going to kill one of you.
Yeah, I'd be eating meat. Fucking Eben flesh.
Eben flesh. One of the other things that I found hilarious about this story, and depending on where your source is, one of the people who went there and came back and was doing their like disposition on everything they saw, they talked about Ebens like to fuck. And it's like the most mind-boggling thing that these little tiny aliens like to get down, and you're like, of course they would. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, they have kids.
Yeah. I just don't know how they're,
it's like
using birth control.
Land of the Lost, where he sees the fucking slee stack having sex.
No.
I think he's about to get it on.
They's about to fuck.
Clapping them lizard cheeks. Yeah, I kind of wonder if any of them banged into those aliens.
Well, as the story goes, 2 of them ended up staying on the planet. So it's, I gotta think that's like one of the deciding factors.
Yeah. So yeah, they do their tenure there. So part of the story too is that 308, the member that died on the journey there, they get there, and so they're like, okay, yeah, well, we want to be able at least to bury our human compadre, whatever. So they're asking the Ebens to give them the body so that they can give them burial. They're like, oh, well, you can't have it because there's nothing really left of the body. And so they say, well, what do you mean there's nothing left? There should, the body should be still intact. And so they take him to this facility where they've basically been they've taken all the blood out, all the organs, all the, DNA matter they can pull out of the body. And there's basically nothing left of the body, really. And they've been doing testing and creating new creatures out of the DNA from 308.
Yeah, some of the descriptions in the story are kind of grotesque. And it's like one of them that I read about years ago was talking about how they basically like sewed the arms and legs of the human onto an Eben body. So he's just like this big, gangly, hideous-looking thing. And then one of them was like, they were basically growing an Eben from the human organs, but the organs were still exposed, and just all this fucked up shit. You like incinerate it, all of it.
Yeah.
But in their society, it was like the highest honor to donate your body to science.
Yeah.
And that's why they were trying to do this like splicing.
Maybe that's what they're coming to Earth for. Just to collect human DNA. I mean, that's what a lot of accounts are, that people are getting abducted.
Could be. I mean, there's like, did you ever see the movie Predators? The one from like 2018?
Yeah.
Yeah, that really terrible one.
Yeah.
One of the...
Well, they have like dogs and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the subplots in that movie, which is actually really cool, kind of in a retcon kind of way, is part of the reason the Predator rips out the spinal column and the skull together is not because of a trophy, it's because they're using human DNA to splice with their own DNA to make their DNA stronger. Mm. And most of your DNA is captured in your spinal fluid, so that kind of adds up.
Aren't they also like trying to create a more efficient creature for them to hunt or something like that?
Yeah, that was also part of it.
Yeah.
The whole movie was just dumb.
Yeah.
Then it's like the super predator is trying to hunt this autistic kid because that's going to make him super advanced. I guess, dude. Sure.
Dude, can you imagine coming up against an autistic predator, bro?
He doesn't do the... He just goes... Autistic screeching intensifies. It's so bad.
Yeah, better run. Yeah, you better run.
3,492. Do you know where the nearest casino is?
You got a fucking Rain Man predator.
Yeah. I always found that part of the story interesting, but at the same time, you have this alien species that kind of lives primitively, but lives more as a collective, but secretly they're mad scientists.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit well together.
Yeah. And that's where I was like, man, this I swear this is a movie plot. Like, they're going to find out what the objective is and be horrified and stranded on this planet. But yeah, so basically they make it through the 10 years. 3 of them die.
Two of them died. So the one died on the way, and then one of them died in a Jeep accident.
Must have been early on.
Yeah, I don't recall when it was, but I know those two passed away. But yeah, then two of them stayed, and the rest went home. And another 10 months to get home, and then a year in quarantine, and then another year of debriefing, and then, what do they call it? Sheep dipped? Where they basically erase your whole identity, and they give them a new identity, and several of them died pretty young because of the radiological effects of having two sons just tore them down. Which, why wouldn't that affect all of them?
Maybe they had different melatonin. I don't know.
Could have been. It was in the 60s. Maybe they were like... I'm not going to say it. Never mind.
So yeah. So like I said, all of this information is being, air quotations, leaked onto a server for our UFO stories, or whatever this message board is. And so they start tracking who this anonymous person is and trace it back to, what's his name?
Rick Doty.
Rick fucking Doty.
Rick fucking Doty.
Who was the in charge of the smear campaign, or like...
Yeah, so he worked for OIS, or OSI, the Air Force's investigation division into all that stuff, essentially. And it was his job to disinform.
Yeah.
And by his account, it was also his job to investigate, but it was also his job to disinform. And that's where you get, like, the situation with Paul Benowitz, where he fucked that guy up.
Yeah.
But then, at some point, switched sides and became, like, a UFO believer and came out and allegedly told the truth that a lot of what he was putting out as disinformation was real information. And I'm always so on the fence about Rick Doty, because I go, fuck, what if he's telling the truth? What if a lot of what they've leaked, allegedly, is actually the truth, and it's just part of a slow campaign to slowly kind of ingrain us with this information that, yes, there are aliens and UFOs and blah, blah, blah. And it was his job all along to put that information out there in, like, bite-sized pieces. Or, you know, even if he was disinforming, he put out some real shit, because it's like, you can only hold people with lies for so long before they start, you know, seeing through or questioning things. And then you go, no, that guy's lying about everything. So I'm always so on the fence.
Yeah. It's hard not to just look at him like, okay, so you had this career working for the government, basically making up stories, creating misinformation and throwing people off the scent of UFO investigations and all these outlandish things, whatever. His career ends there, and then he just figures out, well, I can just keep doing the same thing. Now I can, but I'll just go under the guise of I'm telling the truth, and still have the same career. Like, I can still get paid for doing the same thing that I've been doing. So it's hard to believe that he was ever telling the truth, or like there's that big switch of him like, oh yeah, it was all real.
Yeah, that's what makes it so difficult.
Yeah,
because there's a part of you that just wants to believe and wants to hear these stories and go, oh my god, that's amazing. But then you got this guy who's playing both sides, and you don't know if anything he says is true. If he's like, the sky's blue, you're like, I'm going to go check myself.
Yeah.
I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Is your name even Richard Doty?
So, which brings us back to like, okay, well, there's a second crash in Roswell, and they collected these bodies, and there's people out here saying that, you know, they covered up the the first one with the weather balloon, how are you going to cover up the second one when they found these bodies? All this shit is bullshit, and the government's going to explain everything. Well, the government's explanation for the bodies was that they had been doing testing. I think it was Operation High Jump, where they were testing and dropping crash test dummies.
Oh no, High Jump was Antarctica.
Oh
yeah, but it's something else with high. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Anyways, they are dropping these crash test dummies from airplanes, or I don't know what they were using to drop these dummies from different altitudes all across the desert, testing areas, and seeing what was survivable for a human being if they had a parachute malfunction. So they're allegedly saying they dropped like thousands of these crash test dummies from various heights. Didn't always recover them because they couldn't find them. But that's what these supposed bodies were that these people saw and found.
Sure, bud.
The problem with that is that program didn't start officially in the government's log books until 1953, and these things were actually found in 1947 in Roswell.
Yeah.
So, and they said, well, people just have a problem with remembering correctly, and that's basically the government's stance on
which
alien
is
bodies.
Their most realistic cover-up answer, because memory is the most valuable thing. Like, you can misremember something. It's just fact, but within that regard, no.
Yeah, if I saw an alien body, 4 or 5 of them on the ground next to an alien craft, and the military shows up and tells me to get the fuck out of there, I don't remember when that was.
You're going to be able to recall every detail of everything.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, I remembered that blade of grass, that tree. Yeah. No, it's... The cover-up game is so weak. And that's, again, with the Rick Doty thing of disinformation. Because you've seen where the government will come up with bullshit excuses. Like absolute stupidest shit possible you could think of to use as a cover-up. But then you have this guy who's disinforming all the way up and down the line. But his stories are much more fantastical, or they're much more like, oh yeah, I could see that,
Yeah.
So why aren't they using somebody like him for their cover-up lines? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what, I mean, when I heard that come back to Rick Doty, I was just like, fuck, man. This is such a good story, and there's so much detail in the recounts of what happened, and it's a really fantastical story. And but it's like, man, this guy had this long career of making misinformation about UFOs. What's to stop him from writing a novel about the aliens and shit like that on the side? And then after his career's over, he just finds this platform to leak it into and kind of create lore around a novel that he's writing. I don't know.
Well, I've watched and listened to a bunch of interviews with him and some of the stories he tells, because he was also an investigator.
Yeah.
He wasn't just out there to disinform. He would actually go investigate on these cases, and some of the stories he tells are like very interesting, and usually you've never heard about it. I mean, he's got other stories about Roswell and things like that, and a lot of them I'm guessing he's honest on. He's like, I don't know firsthand about this, but this is what a colleague told me, or blah blah blah. But so many of his stories that he would tell about his investigations would be so easy to cover up. Like, I remember this one where this lady was having trouble, and she would kind of like go into this like sleep paralysis, and she would imagine these little lizard people coming into her room, and she can't move, and they would take her body out and put it in the ship, and they'd fly away and come back and put her back on her couch. And so him and his team went in to investigate, and the first thing they did was put up some cameras and stuff. And he's like, sure enough, these 3 aliens come in, the little tiny lizard people, and would stand over her body, and you could see her try to fight out of it, but she can't move. They would pick up her body, put it in a ship, leave, come back, and put her back. And it's like, okay, you could be totally lying, but there's literally no way for me to prove it, and I've never even heard of this story before.
Yeah, right.
But the thing with the story about Project Serpo is it was allegedly created by this woman who was a science fiction writer, but she worked for the CIA. And it's widely believed that she made up this story to give to Rick Doty to slowly leak or disinform. But other people have seen the actual documents from Project Serpo and say it was nothing like what this story is. It's something completely different, what have you. But it wasn't actually called Project Serpo. It was called Crystal Knight. So it's like, yes, you've seen something from Project Serpo, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to discredit that. But the fact that you have a science fiction writer working for the CIA is pretty interesting. And that kind of makes it to where, like, that could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did this really happen? And then they gave the story to this lady to spruce it up a little bit. You know, throw in that ominous, we're testing on your buddy's body thing. Or to try to muddle some of the details so it's kind of like unbelievable. Like, yeah, super advanced society, but they live in mud huts. You know, and then she gives it to Rick Doty to put out there. But maybe originally it was a real story. And she was just trying to fuck it up to put it out there. And then people would be like, that's stupid. None of that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or was it just completely fabricated by this lady? And like the CIA was like, oh, this is good. Give it to that Doty guy and he'll tell everybody about it and all the stupid people will buy it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we're never going to know the answer, but it's fun to speculate.
Yeah, it is fun to speculate. Like in most of these things that we talk about, I believe that there's probably something that really happened. So the basis of it is true, and I think that's the easiest way to sell a lie is to base it in truth.
Yeah.
And then just embellish the details of what actually happened, and you know, you can exaggerate things here and there, and then give a bunch of details from your imagination to make it seem more believable. But you know, most of these things that we talk about, I do believe, are based on something that really happened.
Yeah. And
just kind of get embellished and enhanced through storytelling.
Oh yeah, that's the telephone game.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're talking about a story, so this allegedly took place in the late 60s and ended in the late 70s. You know, if people have been changing hands with this story for so long, you know, people throwing a little bit here and a little bit there, pretty soon it's not the same story.
Right.
And it could have been just as simple as, yeah, we sent 13 astronauts to planet Serpo, and they didn't experience any of that shit. It was just a very basic, like, commune living kind of thing, and then they came back and everything was cool. Instead, you get all this other stuff, like, yeah, they were experimenting on his body, and they were trying to splice him with ebens and these other creatures and stuff, and it was so ominous. And oh, and by the way, they live in mud huts, or they're all vegetarians. Like, you could spin it however you want as time goes on.
What if they took these people and kind of put them into like some underground bunker that is a facility to make look like outer space, and they lived there and they didn't even know it for 10 years?
Yeah. That's actually a really cool thought.
Yeah, and they were just doing an experiment on these people to see if they can make them believe that they're on another planet, or see how they would survive putting, you know, humans into this alien environment that's been created but totally foreign to them, and see how they would survive if they go crazy, or if they, you know, adapt.
Yeah, like a thought experiment kind of thing.
And like Truman Show style.
Yeah. Only somehow Jim Carrey is wackier than aliens.
Yeah.
That guy's bananas. So, I think the big underlying question is, do you believe that an alien spacecraft crash landed at Roswell?
I do.
Do you believe the story about Project Serpo?
Not how it's told. I believe it was probably a project that they did. What was actually done, I don't know, but the way that it's told, I can't. It's way too much of a movie for me.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that would need to be dispelled.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of confliction in that story. So it's I'm on the exact same page. Did aliens crash land? Fuck yeah, they did. Project Serpo could have happened, but
I think the biggest thing for me is like there is no solid proof that it was real. There's not really a cover-up that was done, like a real hardcore cover-up in the whole thing, and all the information is coming secondhand.
Yeah.
From a source that can't be 100% trusted,
or verified or anything.
So it's just a secondhand story that's a crazy fucking story that can't be verified by any of the people that were involved. So it's like, and like Roswell, all the people that were involved pretty much have come forward and said that it was a cover up.
Yeah.
Including a lot of the military people, most of the military people.
Yeah, even one of the guys who was a truck driver, and I can't think of his name. He was driving the truck that had like the UFO on the bed. Came forward and told his story, even though it's not a lot. It's basically like, I was told to drive from here to here. I saw the thing get loaded and unloaded. But yeah, I'm talking about the stop in Texas and all that. And most of those guys were just kept completely in the dark and told, like, you're not to talk about this, not even to each other, and blah, blah, blah. Which I always have the hardest time with, because I think even if I was in the military and I was part of one of those operations, and they're like, you can't talk to anybody, not even each other. It'd be like, yes, sir. And then, when we're out grabbing a beer at the bar, dude, did you see that fucking alien they put in the truck?
Or they're like, you can't look underneath this tarp. You got to transport this. Yeah, I'd stop to take a piss and like.
Have you ever seen that video of? It was kind of viral for a minute, of like this semi, and it looked like it had a flying saucer on the back.
Yeah.
And you watch it and you go, there's no way. They would have covered it up better. That's so dumb. And then the other part of you goes, what if they did it on purpose?
Yeah.
Because they know you're not going to believe it. Yeah. You're going to go, why wouldn't they put a bigger tarp on it? Or why wouldn't they transport it in a closed bed or something? Maybe they're just getting so bold about everything that they're like, fuck it, put it out there. We can always just say it can't be real.
Plain sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy to think about. And I think Roswell was just like the big spark for that culture to come about, because there's been so many other things that have happened across the planet since Roswell that are much bigger than Roswell itself. I mean, even in I think it was like 1958, you had the Battle for Los Angeles, where that was a big thing. Like, people are literally on their front porch or on their back porch watching this thing happen.
Right.
Like, watching these artillery shells and these machine guns get fired at this object that's you can't really see, but then it gets downed, and the military's like, yeah, we're sending divers down to retrieve it. It was an enemy plane or whatever. They're a blatant lie. But in this major metropolitan area of Los Angeles, right off the coast, you're firing all this military weaponry at this unknown object, and you're just going to tell us, yeah, it's just one plane? Get fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think the biggest... Roswell was... To me, it seems like the story is a lot more about the cover-up and the obvious cover-up.
Yeah.
And just the the realization of the population should be that the government is willing and does cover these things up.
For sure.
For the benefit of them, and you can see it as benefiting the safety of, the people here in America, or citizens, but as citizens of the planet, we all should have a right to know that if there are fucking aliens flying around.
Yeah, or living among us, or
Yeah.
trapped in some secret military base. I mean, at the very least... Wearing human skins,
Yeah.
or robot suits, because they're little tiny ones, like in Men in Black.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a crime against humanity to keep that information quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you take into account things like, what if the aliens that you have locked up in this one particular base carry some kind of biological pathogen that if they get out, humans are just going to start dying just by being in their proximity? Or if that alien was to get out and get a message to their people, it's going to be like planet versus planet war, because they're going to be mad about you taking, their prints or whatever. I do think it really is against humanity as a whole to not share that information, especially while we're so grounded in religion and in this idea of God or deities and things like that, that it would actually answer a lot of fundamental questions. Are we alone in the universe? Is there a higher power? Is there an ideal that we can strive towards, like these aliens that are an extremely advanced civilization that, live very primitively? Maybe that's what we should be aspiring to be. But instead, we live in consumerism, and the way we do things we think is the best, maybe they have it the best, and we don't know,
Yeah. So it makes you wonder if, there are aliens out there and they're aware of us, and why would they be so secretive of letting themselves be known? Because they could obviously very easily not let the government cover up these things, right?
Oh.
They just appear flying over New York City, and there's going to be 10 million people having video of it. So they could very easily disperse the notion that they don't exist.
Yeah.
Why is it that they don't reveal themselves?
Well, and that's where I kind of come into the whole treaty with leaders of the planet, and some people have come out and said, oh yeah, aliens have been meeting with the President of the United States for decades. Obviously not this one, he wouldn't remember. But
they probably meet with him every day just to remember, your name is Joe, remember?
Your name is Joe. He's like, yeah, kids touch my leg hair. Did you see his most recent blunder?
No.
I can't remember what it was, but he's reading something off of a teleprompter, and I can't remember exactly what he says. It's he finishes saying his sentence and he goes, pause. People are going to vote for that guy, too.
Yeah. Fucking vote for Ron Burgundy. He'll read anything off the teleprompter, too.
Go fuck yourself, San Diego. Yeah, it's, even, there was one guy, he was part of the Israeli government, came out and said, oh yeah, our leader has definitely had meetings with extraterrestrials. I was part of them, and there was another country that did it too. And it's also believed that they, had treaties with the government of Russia and things like that. Which a lot of that could be total hearsay, but it makes perfect sense of why you don't see a lot of UFOs in flying around the Salt Lake Valley or whatever, because it's maybe part of the treaty is yeah, you can fly around all you want over here by Dugway, just don't fly over there. That's all we're asking, Or
I wonder if it's the alien civilizations look at our planet and see these guys can't even fucking get along with each other, man.
Yeah.
If they know that we're here, they're going to try to fucking bomb us too.
Yeah, they could see us flying over a metropolitan area, and everybody's going to start shooting at my ship, and then the bullets are going to hit other people who don't deserve to get hurt and whatever. And I would like to think humanity is better than that, but we're not.
No. No. They'll try to see what they have on their planet and then try to fight them for it.
Yeah. Or try to fuck them, or, you know, it just makes...
So have you looked at the crash in Brazil? Have you seen anything about that? Like Varginha?
Varginha? Yeah. So I recently watched the documentary on that.
First Contact? Or?
Yeah. I think that's what it's called. The story is completely believable. The documentary is kind of hard to watch because it's strictly only people telling their stories. There's no pictures. There's no real like evidence to support pretty much any of it. But when these people tell their stories, you believe them because you can tell they're being sincere about what they're saying. So yeah, the two aliens that were running through the town of Varginha and like the three girls who saw it in their backyard and all that, I 100% believe it's true.
Yeah. Well, I just bring that up because because they talk about the one guy that like drove, so it was like two cops. They're out there looking for, they don't know what they're looking for really, and they see this alien creature like hiding on the side of the road. One of the cops jumps out and grabs him and pulls him into the car, and they take him to the military base where they're at. Shortly after that, like 2 weeks later, that guy, the cop that grabbed him, dies of some mystery illness, they don't know what, and they quarantine his body, and they don't like they talked to the doctor that like examined him after he died, and he said, yeah, we don't know what it was that killed him. So maybe it is something that just coming in contact with them is just harmful to our biology.
Yeah, it's reasonable to believe that things from another planet might have a pathogen or some kind of change in their biome that would be harmful to us in some way, shape, or form. And even in that story, all the people who were in the hospital where they took the one alien said it stunk like super bad, and for weeks they could smell it. And most things that you smell, even that are disgusting to smell, the smell will pass in a day or two at the most. I've never smelled anything that stuck with me for like a week or 2 weeks.
Owl shit, maybe.
Well, that one definitely stuck with me for the next few hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, something that would stink that bad for weeks on end, even when you're not at the place where it was, that there's something different there. It's almost like harmful to your sinus cavity.
Yeah, like saturates inside your or nasal cavities. Well, it's almost like when the Spanish arrived in South America and a lot of the indigenous people started dying from just diseases that
they carried with them
that they were kind of accustomed to, and the people that were here had never seen those, viruses and illnesses before, and just died off real quick from
Well, that's another thing that kind of makes the Serpo story a little difficult to believe, is that they were eating food from another planet. That's a huge risk.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're out of food and you got to try to do what you got to do, but
they're going to go out and kill just random ass fucking creatures that they find and eat them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about this. Like, we're from this planet, right? You and I have lived on this planet our whole life. I mean, I came here in a rocket from Krypton.
Yeah, but you were like, what, 9 months old maybe?
Yeah, something like that. I was a wee baby. But yeah, I've lived here my whole life.
Lift a truck at that point.
Yeah, barely. Now I'm like... But if you dropped both of us off in some random woods or jungle, there's things there that are edible that we would eat that would kill us, and we don't know what the fuck they are.
Yeah.
Like, we're not survival experts, we're not trained to deal with that. So we could go, oh, that's a berry, that's edible. You eat it, and then you're shitting your pants in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So imagine
like Jack Black. Ooh, a mushroom.
Ooh, a mushroom.
Like in Tenacious D, where he eats all those mushrooms and trips balls.
So imagine going to another planet and being like, oh, that animal looks edible. But it could be extremely toxic. You'd have no idea.
Yeah.
That's when you'd be like, which one do I like the least? Because you're going to guinea pig this shit.
Hey, taste this. What does that taste like to you?
Yo, 410, come here. Try this.
Does this taste like hot dog to you?
Yeah. That is like one of the more unbelievable factors to me.
Yeah.
I mean, unless the Ebens like had such advanced medical technology and such advanced understanding of the human biology that they could go, yeah, you could eat this, it won't hurt you.
Yeah. I mean, they've allegedly been visiting for thousands of years. They probably had an understanding of how, especially they've been probing people and, you know, finding out about how our bodies work for millennia. They might know what we can tolerate.
Yeah, well, and there's always the prevailing theory that these aliens, these small grays, are a much more advanced version of us, or in some way are not our ancestors, but they're us from way further down the line. So biologically, they wouldn't be that much different. So it's a theory, but I'm still like, I'd be like, ration that food, guys. We're all getting skinny.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much fucking... At that point, like, they've got rations of probably space food, which is tubes of fucking processed meat or something. How much are you really gonna splurge on that shit? I don't know.
No, that was probably the real reason why they wanted 308's body back. They're like, we know we can eat that meat.
He's a carbon-based fucking piece of meat at this point.
Like, humans have been eating humans for a long time. We're going to be okay munching on this dude.
Can you splice any genes into making us a steak dinner?
Yeah. So, rounding that one out. Serpo, hard to believe. Roswell, absolutely.
Yeah. 100% agree.
Now, here's a real question. If you could know the truth about those things, but you could never talk about it, would you accept that deal?
The speculation is like part of the fun.
Exactly.
I would say yes. Because I would just be listen to other people talk and be like, oh, that's interesting.
Idiot.
Maybe you two might one day be advanced enough to know the truth, like I am.
You'd be like, if you had the brain power and the maturity of myself, you could know the truth about these things, but I don't think your little mind can handle it.
So get fucked.
I don't know. I think that would lead to a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Because if I knew that you knew the truth about it, I would be beating up on you all the time. Dude, just fucking tell me. This is bullshit.
Makes you think I don't already know the truth.
Do you? You didn't say you couldn't.
I said the speculation is the funnest part.
Yeah, but it wasn't part of the bargain that you couldn't just tell me that you knew. You just can't talk about it.
True.
So do you know?
Do you know?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
All right. Thanks, Boo.
Okay, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.